Welcome back to the Dark Reading News Desk at RSA. Terry Sweeney here with Dark Reading, and joining me now is Sam Curry, CISO with Zscaler. Sam, welcome to the Dark Reading News Desk.
Thanks for having me. It's good
Appreciate
to be
you doing this. We are talking about some highlights from the Zscaler Threat Labs 2024 phishing report. There's a lot of interesting data that I'm sure it uncovered. One of the interesting points was a nearly 60% increase in phishing attacks year over year. I have an idea where this is going, but tell us what you think is driving those attacks.
Well, it was 58.2% increase, which is truly massive. And I think what everyone's surprised about is that it keeps getting bigger. I think the real reason is that it keeps making money, to be honest. But we've seen big improvements in the technology on the dark side. You can see that in the efficiency and the effectiveness of the attacks. And that's driven really by phishing we see a lot of, and we see a lot of deep fakes, which shouldn't be surprising, I think, to anybody. And it keeps making money, I mean, at the end of the day, right? We see, the report also covers, by the way, to some degree, which countries are most affected, which verticals and sectors. So it's really a deep dive. For instance, the US, UK, Canada, Germany, India, those are the countries that are seeing the highest spike. And that's not entirely surprising. I think those are the countries you'd expect, the usual suspects, as it were. But when you dig into the details, there's an awful lot happening from an innovation perspective on the dark side. And of course, the usual suspects remain the victims. And on our side, we see over 2 billion of these attacks and stop them. And so when we actually analyze it and dig into it, we're looking for the trends.
So, but it sounds like that the dark side has also understood the automation benefits of AI as well and are putting them to good use.
Yeah, that's very much the case. You can see some of that emerge with patterns. So as you see, it only takes about 10 prompts to actually set up a phishing site and get the phishing emails going. It's just the basic rudimentary ones, which is much faster than it used to be. It's almost phishing as a service at this point, or phishing as a service. And even the deep fakes have become much simpler. So they're getting more effective as a result of this, and they call it time to market for the attackers is much, much shorter.
Sure.
And so if they can roll it out faster and they can start to get results better, it's just more profit for them. And they can do it on a wider scale than ever before. Also, translation makes it easier, so they can broaden their targets to places that might not have the immunity they had before. Of course. So AI is an accelerant. It's a way of, as a catalyst, if you will, for being able to reach wider markets in a dark sense and be able to reach more victims.
That's terrific context, Sam. Can you take a deeper cut at how phishers are using artificial intelligence to execute these more sophisticated and elusive attacks?
Absolutely. So if you actually look into the report, there's some concrete examples. So they're enumerated in there if people want to go and have a look at it. But we've seen, first of all, LLMs and AIs and Gen AI in particular, we've seen them advance because we found a common language and a common structure to how to advance AI. It's a linguistic thing, first and foremost. I think most people are thinking of it as assistants and co-pilots, but the dark side have those, and now they're starting to specialize in some ways. And so you can think of it now as speciation. It all came together to advance the state of the art, and we're talking about how we use it in defense. And what we're not seeing is behind the scenes what they're doing in this asymmetric warfare on the dark side. And so they're testing it, they're using it for better filtering. They're producing not just, say, 0 days in the classic sense, but 0 weeks now and 0 months. And these phishing attacks are getting better with every generation because, frankly, it's more iterative. So we've seen machine learning for years, but now the toolkit's gotten broader. And the language manipulation and the language streaming is getting better too.
You mentioned the prevalence of phishing and deep fake phishing in particular. Any specific insights or examples you can share with us?
Yeah, even our own company saw some employees that were targeted with this. Somebody pretended to be our CEO with one of our employees and said, "Hey, this is Jay." Of course, it wasn't Jay, and said, "Can you please go buy some cards?" Let's say CEOs don't do that, especially for large companies. But they're trying pretty much everything, and they go quite low in the company too. So it's not just necessarily the CEO or the CFO or the CMO. Sometimes it's relatively low managers. And so I think this is a time when the best defense is to stick to processes, to form up and say, hey, CEOs don't do this, and to establish that even executives are not going to ask you to do this. Say it on the next company meeting. Come out and say, our company is going to follow these processes in an ironclad way, and that people will be rewarded for sticking to those processes and to double check. Because what our employee did was call, or rather I think in this case it was text, our CEO and say, is this really you? And that's what you got to do. Go out of band and check on it.
Good advice. What about twinned attacks? Like we're also seeing like phishing that is often coupled with social engineering, for example, phone calls that either encourage the email recipient to call this number to address this issue. It seems legitimate. How much of that showed up?
Well, some of it is call this number and you don't actually do it because it gives confidence that somebody even suggested it. But now we're actually seeing when you do, there's something there.
Right.
So there's multiple avenues of compromise. Remember, the whole goal is to either give information or to provide enough, call it confidence, because they're really cons, right? They're confidence schemes. Enough confidence that what you're dealing with is legitimate. And so really it's always a question of back up, act skeptically, and even that's going to get very difficult. So this is an opportunity for innovation, I think. We're certainly doing that. Our Zero Trust Exchange is stopping these attacks in transit, which is how we get this data, and we've got new innovations coming along all the time. But I think across the industry, it's time for us not just to take a least trust or zero trust approach, it's also time for innovation in business processes, in other areas from a software perspective, but also we have to start thinking, how do we get ahead of this societally and culturally? Some of the biggest challenges are cultural ones, and we are not yet prepared as a society or as a civilization for exactly how these things can come at us. We also need to think about how to use AI in defense, and that's not just in the classic spots we've deployed software before. There are new ways we have to do this, and frankly, that's new opportunities for business too.
Are you sort of sneaking up on the idea of offense as defense?
Well, yeah, I wouldn't say in a hack back sort of way, but a defend forward is always a good idea, right? Assume compromise, right? Assume that somebody is trying to call you and you really can't go wrong at that point, and somebody is trying to take advantage of you. That is as true on a network as it is with the next phone call that comes in.
Talk about some of the new or emerging phishing tactics or campaigns that emerged as part of the Threat Labs report.
Yeah, so in the report itself, we look at Zoom in particular and other unified communication, right? What's happening over things like Teams and meetings and those sorts of things. And what we see is that the deep fakes proliferate, right? So what people are trying to do is to say, how do I convince someone they're really interacting with real human beings and that this is legitimate, and how do I reinforce that? And there are examples in the report of that. We've all heard the anecdotes and we've all heard the reports of a lot of money being transferred and a lot of companies being taken advantage of. But let's just say, if there's a chance that somebody can get a big amount out, it's worth a big investment to go after it. And we're going to see an increase in that in the months and years to come.
Right. Sam, take us out with some discussion about the most effective security strategies for companies to mitigate these risks we've been discussing.
I think really the best strategy that a company can have is one of high skepticism and training. It's one of sticking to processes. If your CEO or your CFO says on the next all hands, this is how money moves and we ourselves will never deviate from it, that goes a long way to giving people the strength and the courage to resist things like deepfakes, phishing, and vishing, and then go a step further. Don't just say that, say there's actually a reward in it when you call us on it. It's just like when we dealt with things like tailgating. If you stop your CMO or your CFO going into a building and says, where's your badge? In a bad culture, you're in trouble. In a good culture, you get a reward. It's the exact same thing with this.
Well, I think you may have pushed me off of clicking on anything in email ever again,
You really
Sam.
shouldn't. I mean, it's a good idea.
Thanks for joining us on the Dark Reading News Desk today.
Thanks for having me.
We've been talking with Sam Curry with Zscaler. This has been Terry Sweeney for the Dark Reading News Desk. Thanks for joining us for this segment. We'll see you next time.